Hello and welcome to The World's Last Night. This is James Thayer. I'm excited today because we are in chapter 37 and we're going to be recalling one of the greater stories in the Bible, which is that of Joseph being sold into slavery, which may have already spoiled some stuff for you, but I'm going to go ahead and pop right in to verse 1 here, and we'll try to stop along the way to explain some things. So Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. These are the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. So he's working with them, and he is also snitching on them, telling his dad about how they are, I guess, slacking, or what they're doing wrong with their work. So verse 3, Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons, because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age, and he made a robe of many colors for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. So Joseph has received this tunic, this coat of many colors, which you've probably heard of before. There's actually like a famous Broadway play about this, and people like to say that this sort of showed that not only was he favored by his dad, but that eventually he sort of became more of a supervisor to his brother's work, because the tunic would have sleeves all the way down to the arms, and it would go down to the ankles, and so it's not really an outfit that you would do a lot of work in, especially if it's multicolored. You wouldn't want to get it dirtied. So it seems to me like Joseph is a goody-goody tissue, and the other brothers don't like it, and they don't like that their dad has favoritism for him. Verse 5, Then Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, Listen to this dream I had. There we were, binding sheaves of grain in the field. Suddenly, my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Verse 8, Are you really going to reign over us? His brother asked him. Are you really going to rule us? So they hated him even more because of this dream and what he had said. So Joseph could definitely be accused of not being tactful. His brothers instantly were able to interpret the dream, just as Joseph probably had. But I'm assuming Joseph was a little more excited about it, and possibly believed this may have been a dream from God and wanted to share the news, but he didn't really think about how this would impact the people that heard it. So he dreamed about these bundles of wheat. He and his brothers were out in a field, they're bundling wheat, and well, suddenly his stood up, and all the ones that his brothers were putting together bowed down to his. And so they interpreted this as that one day Joseph will rule over the rest of his brothers, and obviously that made them angry. He's already the favorite, and now he has the audacity to tell them this dream he had. So then he had another dream and told it to his brothers. Look, he said, I had another dream. So Joseph hasn't learned his lesson. And this time, and so I'm continuing reading the dream. And this time the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. He told his father and brothers, but his father rebuked him. What kind of dream is this that you have had, he said. Are your mother and brothers that I going to bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in hand. So this could be backing up a little bit when his mother was still alive. Could be his stepmother, I don't know. But the dream about having the sun and the stars, and the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowing down, were basically saying that his entire family, including his dad, would one day be ruled over by him. And of course, his dad doesn't like that, so his dad's rebuking him also. So we'll continue. Verse 12. His brothers had gone to pasture their father's flock at Shechem. His brothers had gone to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. So two things. One, I wanted to go back a little bit and talk about the sheaves of grain. That's actually really important because we're going to find out exactly how this dream comes true later in Egypt is related to grain. It's related to food. So keep that in mind whenever we get to that part. Second, it looks like they're pasturing near Shechem, which is that place where they buried their idols previously, so they're not too far from where they were previously. Okay, so they're pasturing their flocks at Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, "Your brothers, are pasturing the flocks at Shechem. Get ready, I'm sending you to them." "I'm ready," Joseph replied. So Joseph's not out there working with them, and instead he is being sent to go supervise them. Then Israel said to him, "Go and see how your brothers in the flocks are doing, and bring word back to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. A man found him there, wandering in the field, and asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph said. "Can you tell me where they are pasturing their flocks?" So this is about a 15-mile hike, by the way. So he is trying to find his brothers pasturing and is getting some directions. You can only imagine when his brothers see him coming, like how they feel about their favorite brother, favoritism brother coming around to supervise them. I'm sure they're super thrilled about that. Okay, so verse 17, "They've moved on from here," the man said. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him in the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. So that's pretty shocking. It's not that they were plotting to make fun of him or to play a prank on him. They're plotting to murder him. Verse 19, they said to one another, "Here comes that dreamer. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We can say that a vicious animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." So now his brothers are literally trying to stop God's word here. Like they're not only opposing their brother, but they're also opposing God's plans. So that's not a good thing to do. Verse 21, when Reuben, and remember Reuben's the oldest, heard this, he tried to save him from them. He said, "Let's not take his life." Reuben also said to them, "Don't shed blood. Throw him into the pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him," intending to rescue him from their hands and return him to his father. So if you remember, Reuben is the one that slept with his father's concubine. Maybe he's trying to make up for that. Maybe he's, since he's the oldest, he's in charge of his brothers' lives. Perhaps he actually has a slight affinity for Joseph, or he just sees that this is unjust. But he is trying to persuade his brothers, not overpower them, but outsmart them in order to save Joseph. So verse 23, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off his robe, the robe of many colors that he had on. Then they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat a meal. They looked up, and there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Now remember, Ishmael was Isaac's brother, not the child of promise, but the father of the Arab peoples. So this is basically some Arabs coming along, a caravan. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin going down to Egypt. Verse 26, then Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." His brothers agreed. Like that's any better. He's our brother. Can't kill him. Let's just, sell him into slavery. Because that's what you do to your own blood. All right, when Midianite traders passed by, they pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who took Joseph to Egypt. So some of Joseph's life could be a type for Jesus. Jesus was sold for, I think it was 30 pieces of silver. I'll have to look it up again. Sold out by Judas, and he was, crucified, whereas Joseph is going into the pit. There's some similarities there. Whatever Joseph has done, being snide, being prideful, he doesn't deserve this. So verse 29, when Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. So tearing your clothes, you're going to see that a lot in the Old Testament. It's a sign of intense grief. I guess Reuben wasn't there when they sold Joseph. He intended to come back and rescue him. Verse 30, he went back to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone. What am I going to do?" So they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a young goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the robe of many colors to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it. Is it your son's robe or not?" So that's pretty evil. So they're being total jerks to their dad, being deceptive, which this is just a dysfunctional family, as we've already talked about. Lots of deceit involved. it's 4 mothers and like 10 brothers and a daughter. So just lots of dysfunction. And so they're mistreating their dad also. Verse 33, his father recognized it. It is my son's robe, he said. A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned for his son. So sackcloth would be like think of it like an itchy potato sack. People would put on sackcloth whenever they're in mourning, or perhaps they're fasting. But it's to sort of remove pleasure. It's a physical representation of an internal emotional despair. That's why they would put it on. So he mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will go down to Sheol to my son mourning. So Sheol, remember we talked about that, sort of like the death place, holding place for the dead. And his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. So there are plans. There's a plan in place. God's going to redeem this. But we got a really great setup. We have these dreams. We have this prophecy that Joseph will rule over his brothers, that they will bow down to him. Now, they didn't like that, so what did they do? They sold him into slavery. They were going to kill him at first. Sold him into slavery. He's on his way to Egypt as a slave. And, they think, well, that's it. We're done with it. But as we know, God has other plans. This honestly reminds me a lot of the movie Gladiator, which is one of my absolute favorite films. I actually watch it when I'm feeling down, like that in The Matrix. The Gladiator is also about a man who was a commander of the Roman armies, and Caesar is about to make him Caesar in his place because Caesar's son is an immoral man, and Caesar doesn't want his son to rule. But the commander, his name is Maximus, is a moral man, a righteous man. And, well, the son finds out about this, murders Caesar, and has Maximus killed. But Maximus survives his execution, escapes, and then he is also sold into slavery. And that whole story is awesome because by the end of it, basically, a slave is able to become more powerful than an emperor by winning the crowds. Well, we're going to see a similar story here. It's just a great story. You can probably, from Joseph's life, think of other movies and other tales that you've heard that you really enjoy too. So we're going to see how God works this out. And once again, I just love the story of Joseph. I actually, I find a lot of the way he responds to situations in myself, which I think is really cool. But additionally, Joseph is just like an actual good character. After he grows up, he's an actual like righteous character that biblical scholars like to point to. Definitely a lot better to dissect and talk about and to have more of a Christ-like figure than some of our past leads have been, such as Jacob and Isaac. So that's all I got today. Until next time, this is James from The World's Last Night.